Hi, welcome to the Legex Show, a podcast that will help you simplify the business ecosystem. Co hosted by the co founders of Legex, Ayush and Vishesh. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the podcast.
Hey guys, welcome to the Legex Show. Today we have Ms. Piali Dasgupta with us. She's the Senior Vice President of the Marketing at Columbia Pacific Communities. So, hi Piali, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, Vanita. Well, my name is Piali, and I head marketing at Columbia Pacific Communities. I've spent 14 plus years in marketing and communication. Started my career with the Times of India as a journalist. So started with, you know, um, one part of communication really, and then moved on to the brand side. Worked with Myntra, Amazon. The last stint was with the Publicis Group as the creative director, and post that, of course, I've been at Columbia Pacific. At Columbia Pacific, I look at after marketing, communication, and PR. And we're the country's largest senior living community operators. We're here to sort of reimagine the space of senior living in the country. And yeah, I'm quite happy to be here at the Legex show today.
Yes, so would you like tell a little bit more about what you exactly do right now at the Columbia Pacific community?
As I said, I head marketing and communication. So what that means is that everything to do with the brand communication, everything to do with PR, essentially brand management, demand generation for the business, uh, all of it, content marketing, right? Or all of it is something that my team and I we drive for the organization. The idea is to actually build a world class brand over the next 5 years, which aims to reimagine the category of senior living in the country and aims to be the region's most preferred senior living community.
Yeah, that's wonderful. So, like Piali, what would you like consider as a highlight in your journey, or what is the differentiating factor you would consider in your journey that is different from all the other people around you?
Well, I think for me, it has to be the fact that I started my career with journalism, and I think the skills that I kind of developed as a journalist, I think
Mhm.
are almost life skills. I would say, which have stayed with me for so many years, and I don't think those would ever kind of go away because those were the skills that I got at a very very young impressionable age in my life and at a very early stage in my career. And I didn't really have, if you look at my journey as a marketer, it was not really a very linear journey. I mean, I didn't really start working with a brand and kind of go up the ladder, in that sense. It was actually, from a journalism background, which is essentially a very very communication led, kind of profile, to then kind of moving on to the brand side. And because I did my masters in communication, I actually got exposed to all the facets of communication. So, whether it was brand communication, whether it was PR, whether it was advertising, whether it was corporate communication, whether it was new media, and whether it was journalism, we sort of got exposed to all of that. And then I chose to kind of, start my career with journalism and then later on move on to, more marcom and marketing sort of roles. And I think that because I have sort of um, seen um, different industries at very sort of pivotal points. So for example, I left the media industry when it was at the height of disruption, when the digital transformation was just kind of gripping the country. I also entered e-commerce, and the business of e-commerce at a time when it was a very very nascent, it was at a very nascent stage in our country, first with Myntra and then with Amazon. And now I've sort of I've been working in a category which is extremely new and extremely sort of niche in the country, which is senior living. So I've always sort of found myself, and I don't know if it has happened consciously or unconsciously, but I've always sort of found myself in roles where I have kind of been been in categories that are at a growth stage, right? At a building stage, I would say. And that kind of has given me a tremendous amount of exposure and opportunity to actually build things from scratch, which is something that I really enjoy doing. Right. So yeah, I mean, I would say that probably is the differentiating factor.
Yeah, that's really nice. So, like, I had a question in mind, like, with regards to the Columbia Pacific communities. In our country, we had a very negative stigma around old age homes. So, how do you think communication is shaping what you think Columbia Pacific communities, and how do you define it?
So you're right that I think the perception, the consumer perception on the category is negative. There is no denying that. In fact, we've done a lot of studies that pretty much suggest the same thing, that it is fairly negative. And I think as a brand, our primary challenge today, our sort of key problem that we're trying to solve today as a brand is to change that perception, is to basically, look at paradigm shift. Because unless we are able to change that very negative perception, we're not going to be able to grow this category. So the way we look at it is that, it should first be a perception change, in the consumers, basically a consumer perception change, followed by category awareness, followed by brand awareness. So that's the funnel that we're looking at. And obviously, because it is really so much about, you know, changing perceptions, changing behavior, it is really, really something that benefits from narratives, right? It benefits from very
Yeah.
narrative driven marketing and communication. And we, attach tremendous importance to content and content marketing. And a lot of our campaigns that we've done in the last 2.5 years have all been ultimately about shattering stereotypes around age, around aging, around the elderly people, and of course around a solution like this, which is senior living, right? So if you look at our print ads, for example, if you look at what we do on social media, if you look at some of our big sort of brand campaigns that we've done over the last 2.5 years, which have gone on to win many, many awards, they have all been fundamentally sort of centered around what we call positive aging, which is a philosophy that we believe in, and which is basically the brand's core philosophy, and which is to kind of um, uh, look at aging as something to embrace, which is to basically look at age as just a number, and to look at aging as something that is fairly empowering, and to ensure that seniors are you know uh,
Hmm.
physically fitter, emotionally more kind of centered, socially more active as they grow older, right? Yes,
Yeah.
I think communication plays a very, very important role, and I don't think this is something that is going to be possible without crafting very, very compelling narratives.
Hmm. So, Piali, like in the today's world, we have seen how the leadership across the world is shifting. So, being like at the heading this marketing department at India's largest community living for elderly people, how do you think the industry is just changing its perspective for women today? And how do you think it was when you like started with your career?
When you say industry, are you specifically talking about a particular industry, or are you talking about
No, you have worked
women at
around
work in
different,
general?
yeah, you have worked around different industries, like in general. How do you think like for women it has changed?
Well, I think that I don't know if it has. I mean, I've been around for about 15 years now, and I don't know if things have sort of drastically changed. Um, I mean, we're still talking about pay parity. We're still talking about, sexual harassment
Hmm.
at workplace that don't get reported, for example. We're still talking about, 4%, a mere 4% of Indian CEOs being women. We're still talking about leadership teams being fairly, mostly, male centric,
Yes,
and,
yes,
very few women in leadership roles. So underrepresentation of women there, etc., etc. So I don't know if there has been tremendously drastic change there, but yes, things have changed. There is no denying it. I think there is there is a conversation or a dialogue across the board on diversity and inclusion. And obviously women are a big part of that, and there is, and a lot of companies today are making serious effort to hire more women. A lot of companies are making, especially new age startups, I
hmm.
know that for a fact. They're making serious attempts at hiring more women because they want to change that ratio. And I think, these are commendable things, right?
Right. You're right. Efforts are being made. They are still in progress.
But one also has
So,
to remember that, work and women at workplaces need to change. One is to say that I'm going to, as at a company level, do a massive, for example, women hiring drive, right? A lot of IT companies do that. I know that because, I mean,
yeah,
I keep hearing about stories. But the other is to say that when you get more women into the system, are you giving them the kind of environment that is conducive for their growth, and for them to flourish, right? I
yeah,
think that is the other piece of the puzzle. So if you are going to look at women differently to the way that you look at men. For example, even today, if a woman is assertive, if a woman speaks her mind, if a woman has the the courage to call a spade, is forthright in a boardroom or wherever else, she will be looked at as, she will be given certain labels. She will be perhaps called bossy, or she would be called dominating, and things like that. The same behavioral attributes are actually admired in a man, right? And it is a reality
yeah,
even today. Maybe it is
right,
not a reality in a lot of organizations, but in certain organizations it continues to be a reality. So the point is that I think this needs to change. The attitude towards women and women in leadership roles, women outside of leadership roles, women at work in general needs to change. We need to be able to provide them, like I said, an environment that is, geared to help them grow, right? Geared to help them grow, to flourish, to basically, fly. And if we're not doing that, then we're only actually solving one part of the problem. We're not solving the whole problem. And one part of the problem is obviously the diversity problem that we're kind of solving by kind of hiring more women and things like that. Right. So, I mean, that's my take on it. So I would say that yes, things have changed, and more or less, I think there's been a lot of positive change in the last decade and a half that I've been working. But I think we still do have a long way to go.
yeah, that's true. So, like, what do you think what could be done to like improve this culture and inclusivity for women at workplace?
Right. So, I think the first thing that I want to talk about is inclusivity itself, and what do we understand by diversity and inclusion. Um, and,
Hmm.
to my mind, diversity and inclusion is not just about gender diversity. That is just one part of diversity and inclusion. Diversity is about all kinds of diversity. For example, in your organization, do you have enough neurodiverse people? Right? Are you consciously making an attempt to hire more people with neurodiversity, mental illnesses, right? Because they're bringing to your organization a very different point of view, a very different perspective, a very different context that you perhaps need and your business needs. But are you making a conscious sort of effort to hire more of them? Are you making an effort to hire people from LGBTIQ communities? Right, that's diversity too. They're hugely underrepresented. um, so there are different kinds of diversities, and I feel like, unfortunately, I think the diversity conversation in our country has sort of mostly centered around women, which is one part of the problem, of course. And I mean, I'm all for more women to be recruited, etc. But I think diversity needs to be looked at holistically, right? The second thing is that, what do we do to solve this? I mean, the answer is pretty simple. I read this quote just about 2 to 3 days back. I think on Women's Day there was this quote that was doing the rounds on the net. And it said that we're all about empowering women, and we're talking so much about empowering women, but what are we doing to to help men deal with these empowered women, right? uh, I think that's something that we need to talk about as well. um, because men need to be a part of this conversation. This is not a conversation just about women to be had by women. Men need to be a part of this conversation because it's very much about them as well. And so it is about, it is about an egalitarian sort of, a culture that you kind of breed, where, what's fair for the man is fair for the woman. And I mean, we're ideally looking at, at a tomorrow where we don't have to discuss pay gap, right? You don't have to ask a woman at the interview stage whether she's planning to have a baby. I mean, why are these questions asked to women even today? You don't ask these questions to a man when you're interviewing him for a role. Do you ask him, are you planning to have a child in the next 1 year? You don't. How is this a fair question for a woman? Why do we have this assumption to begin with, that, why is this like a default assumption that, a woman who's going to get into, I mean, who's going to kind of bring up a family, etc., will not be able to also contribute meaningfully at work, right? So I think these are very deep rooted kind of perceptions, right? And it's it's a lot of social conditioning, right? And I don't see this kind of, you know um, changing overnight, because that's not going to happen. So I think there needs to be, uh, sort of, how should I say this? I mean, it really needs to be at that level of kind of, having conversations and trying to change perceptions. So even here, it is really actually about trying to change perceptions. And the only way we'll be able to change perceptions if we have more and more women at leadership roles, making policy changes, for example, having these conversations, facilitating these conversations, but also making sure that men are a part of these conversations.
Yeah, that's true. I think everyone should be included in such conversations as there won't be any change coming anytime soon. So, coming to the mental illness, I feel we spend more than half of our lives at the workplace. I personally work about 12 hours a day and sleep around 6 to 8 hours. So, with all of us spending so much time at work, mental health is not just a celebrated cause but an essential thing to live and grow peacefully. I would love to know your insights on mental health, both at workplace and at home, and how inclusion equality can be spanned across to make such positive changes.
I didn't get the last part of the question. What was the last part of the question?
So, how do you think including, like, what are your insights on mental health, both at, like, how could we, like, implement that on both workplace and at home, and how inclusion equality can be spanned across to make such positive changes?
Right, Vanita, I'm glad you asked me this question, because mental health is something which is, it's a topic that is very close to my heart. It's something that, I actively work towards. I do a lot of pro bono work around mental health, and that is because I have been, mentally ill for over half my life. I got diagnosed with clinical anxiety and depression when I was 13 years old, and I've lived with this disease ever since. And obviously, it is impacted me as a person and my life tremendously. And therefore, I not only am I a mental health advocate, in that I speak at various platforms to raise awareness around mental
Hmm.
illness, and what it is like to live with a mental illness and actually be working, but also to try and see what I could do to destigmatize conversations around mental illness in this country, and try and see how I can give back to the community, give back to help out
Hmm.
people that are struggling today, right? Mental illness is is a topic that is for a very long time did not get its due. It is only very recently, I would say, in the last 3 to 4 years, that there has been awareness around it. I would say primarily after Deepika Padukone came out and spoke about her struggles with depression. That's really when the spotlight shifted, and there was widespread awareness, and people started having conversations around it. Prior to that, I would say that it was very much something that was plagued by a tremendous amount of stigma, misconceptions, all kinds of things, and one has to realize that um someone with mental illness, to
Hmm.
be at work and to function at a certain level of productivity and to continue being extremely productive is a massively challenging exercise. Yeah. And if you're not going to be aware as an employer, as a manager, as somebody in the leadership team, as a people officer, as somebody who's making policies in the company, that people with mental illness come to work, contribute to work, but actually live with this massive challenge, then you are actually not helping them at all, right? There are millions of people across the world living with mental illness, one form or at least one form of mental illness or the other, and a large
Hmm.
part of them choose not to talk about it. And the reason why they choose not to talk about it, particularly at work, is because of the fear of being stigmatized, because of the fear of being labeled at work, because of the fear of being judged at work, because of the fear of their performance being seen through a certain lens, right? And so on and so forth. So they continue to live a very, I would say, kind of strange existence where they go to work, they struggle every day, they're barely able to cope, and they come home and they kind of break down every day, right? um,
Hmm.
what I have noticed in the last 14 odd years that I've been working is that awareness around mental illness and what it means to be mentally ill, right, is uh, I would say zilch. It's zero, right? There is no awareness. Leadership teams in very large organizations I have found have zero awareness around it, nor do they particularly care. They do not know what to say, how to say things to somebody who's suffering from a mental illness. And they have absolutely no idea how to deal with somebody like that, right? And that is because they have not been trained. That is because awareness on the whole is very low. And that is because nobody has really sat down and thought about what do we do with this problem. And that's fundamentally because there is a tremendous amount of hesitation and discomfort around talking about mental illness, which I have found very strange, because mental illness is just like any other physical illness. Just the way you have a bad tummy if you've eaten something terrible or whatever, you can have a disease of the mind. It is about certain chemicals in your brain not getting secreted the way they should be, right? It's not
Right.
something to stigmatize. You're not helping the problem at all by doing it. And I feel that organizations that are extremely high pressure. And I don't want to name these organizations, but we all know that, there do exist a lot of organizations that are, uh, they're almost like pressure cooker. And I have been a part of some of those organizations, are particularly punishing for people with mental illness, because not only are they sort of breeding very toxic work environments which only make your illness get worse, but they're also not doing anything to support you, right? um, we have to understand that somebody with mental illness is actually fighting two challenges. It's a dual challenge. It is a battle with your own mind that you're constantly fighting. Constantly, when I say constantly, I mean that, it's literally 24/7. And it is also a battle with the external world, who refuses to acknowledge that this is indeed an illness, that this is indeed a real illness. And I think that this needs to change, and this will again change, like every other change that you need to bring into a system. It will again change fundamentally with conversations. It cannot happen in any other way. It needs to be with the help of, large scale conversations that you have at various platforms and fora, where you first attempt to normalize conversations around mental illness. I actively approach corporate houses to kind of talk about the importance of this, because India is headed towards a mental illness crisis, and experts have said this, that mental illness is actually going to be the next pandemic. And I mean, it's bound to happen with the kind of lives that we lead, and the kind of absolutely, uh, frantic, insane lives that we lead. It's bound to happen. But unless we have conversations, we unless we normalize conversations around mental illness, unless we create platforms within organizations where people with mental illness are able to come out in the open and talk about the struggles that they're going through on a daily basis, and what really goes on in their minds, right? And why do they behave the way they do? Why do they, for example, look at things in a completely different manner than somebody that does not have the illness? We're not going to be able to raise awareness around it, and we will continue to function the way we are, which I think is the long term. In the long term, I think is just not a good thing. I mean, it's a dangerous way of sort of functioning. Yeah.
Mm. So, like, I also personally believe that we should have a society where, like, which understand what mental illness actually is, and we should make people comfortable enough so they don't fear away from talking about it. So, do you feel a particular sector of our society, because of the social dynamics or the workplace culture, are more prone to the mental illness, or is it the same for everyone?
Are more prone to mental illness?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if there is data available on this, and I don't like to comment on anything which is not data backed. But I mean, obviously, when you talk about particular segments of society, I mean, the marginalized sections of society that have very little available resources to them, and they actually fight for the basics every day, are obviously on a day-to-day basis under tremendous, you know, pressure. And their struggles are survival struggles, right? I mean, they struggle to just survive. A lot of things that you and I in the privileged society take for granted, they do not have access to that. And that can put additional, sort of mental pressure on somebody. Having said that, I do want to make something very clear, because this is something that is largely misunderstood, right? And
Hmm.
illness has nothing to do with privilege. All right. You
Right.
can be a very privileged person, right? You can have all the resources that you need. You can have access to a lot of wealth, a lot of facilities, a lot of privilege. You can even be very famous, like we've seen in the case of Deepika, and you can still be mentally ill. You can still go through
Hmm.
depression and anxiety, because it's essentially something that is, well, it is to a large extent, biological, right? So
Right.
privilege should not be or the lack of privilege should not be confused with with having an illness. And while yes, people that are already under a tremendous amount of pressure uh, will be prone to it for sure, because I mean it is a pressure on your mind which will then deteriorate your mental health. But it is not true that uh, people of a certain people of a certain societal strata will kind of be more mentally ill than the rest. It doesn't really work that way at all. It can affect anybody at any stage in their lives, at any phase in their lives. It does not discriminate against gender. Mental illness does not know gender, it does not know caste, it does not know color, it does not know race, it does not know religion. It can happen to anyone. And that is why there is a need to normalize conversations around it. Because today it could be me, but tomorrow it could very well be you. And unless we talk about it, unless we try to understand what it is really like to actually live with it, um, we are not even going to be able to identify it as a problem. And that is the problem.
So, like we discussed how like society should include and how what should be the changes in the culture of the organization. So, Kelly, what do you think? Like, what would you suggest me on a personal level, to me or any other individual? How should we take care of our mental health personally?
So, first of all, like a lot of, sort of books and articles and, you know, things that you kind of just read will tell you that do more of what you enjoy. This is something that I really do believe in. If you do have the time, and I know time is, I think, the most scarce commodity today in our lives. But the idea is to actually do more of what you really enjoy. It could be reading, which calms you. Like, I mean, for me, it's reading because it really helps me calm down. It's sketching. It's probably watching something interesting. So it's just the small things, and none of these actually cost you a lot of money, right? But it's just the small things, but
Right.
these are things that bring me real joy. I actually find it very exhausting to go to parties and socialize and things like that, so I don't like to do that. But for somebody else, that could very well be a source of joy. So the idea is to identify sources of happiness and to do more of that, and almost make it a part of your habit, so that you're finding time every day, even if it is just half an hour, but you're finding time every day to do that. Because at the end of a very, very hectic, crazy day, and we all sort of lead very hectic lives, you want to find that one little bright spot every day. That's your reason to kind of keep going, right? That's basically that oxygen that you need. It's what keeps you alive. So I think that's one thing that's very, very important. The second is, and it's been medically proven, my doctors have always advised me, and I have kind of stuck to that advice um, for many, many years now, that you need to find time to exercise. Exercise does help. If you're mentally ill already like me, then you definitely have to exercise, because it's like medicine. You need to. It's the way you would pop a pill. Similarly, you would have to exercise, because it releases happier hormones. Serotonin in your brain. And even if the feeling is just momentary, even if that high from exercise is just momentary and it is just for that 1 hour or whatever, but it's healthy, and you need to kind of do that. The third, I would say, is try and kind of um, you know sort of cut yourself out of networks or people that just are a source of a lot of toxicity in your life, right? And we do, all of us have those kind of people that we know. There could be people like that at work, which would be a little difficult to kind of avoid. But basically, try and avoid people that act as triggers. Try and avoid people like that. Try and avoid situations like that act as triggers. And I think when you live with mental illness, what happens over a period of time, if you've lived with it for as long as I have, which is over 20 years, what happens over a period of time is that you don't necessarily feel better in terms of, your disease does not actually get that much better, at least it didn't get for me. But what does happen is that you are able to identify triggers that cause you to feel worse, and over a period of time you're able to eliminate those triggers from your life. So for example, a trigger could be anything. It could be a place, it could be a smell, it could be all kinds of things, and sometimes it's even people. They may say things that are not helping you at all. They may bring back memories that are not helpful, right? And the idea is to actually distance yourself from anything or anyone that is a trigger. And I do urge people to be quite selfish about it, right? The idea is to snap out of it and say that, no, I'm sorry, but you know I'm not interested, or whatever. I mean, do not let those triggers come into your life at all. It's not easy, um, but it's something that one must strive to do. And I think finally, I would sort of say that, um, sometimes I have found that, doing random acts of kindness, and there's a lot of conversation on random acts of kindness, actually bring you a lot of happiness, right? Because ultimately I feel that we as human beings sort of exist for other people, right? We exist to also give back to society, to do something for a fellow human being. And we can get very caught up in our lives, in our very busy kind of lives that we lead, and not be able to do this on a regular basis. But I think even if you are able to do something meaningful for somebody, maybe once in 6 months, right? I think it does kind of bring you happiness. For example, I have decided to help out people with mental illness, to talk about my journey with mental illness, to give back, to do a lot of pro bono work around this, because this is something that is a you know that does drive me quite a bit, and I feel like it's my sort of purpose in life. So I think finding that purpose, right, finding that reason to kind of stay alive and reason to exist, and kind of trying to um, you know uh, in some ways give back, I think does help. Yeah.
No, that's true. We all should like do as much as we can from our end. So, Kelly, there were a lot of discussion around balance, culture, and everything. So, what is the perspective from like what is your perspective on balance? Like I feel it is central to all of this. And what is the balance you think people talk about all the time and how it should be looked upon?
Do you mean, when you say balance, do you mean work life balance?
Yeah, work-life balance,
You mean specifically work life balance?
work-life, mental peace, other relationships you have,
Right, right.
like in life as a whole.
I don't know if I have a formula. I don't think most of us have a formula or I don't think we have cracked this one. I feel that, at least my take on work life balance is this, that, you know, um, you need to be 100% present in whatever it is that you're doing, whether it's work or life, right? I mean, if you are out you know watching a film, now of course we can't can go to the theaters anymore, but when we were, and if you're going to be constantly thinking about deadlines, and a campaign that needs to go live, and sort of have conversations on WhatsApp with your team, while you're actually watching a film, um, then you're neither are you doing justice to the film, nor are you actually kind of able to work well like that. So I think, ultimately everything does boil down to time management. And I keep saying this, because I do believe this a
Hmm.
lot. I think everything does finally boil down to how well you're able to manage the 24 hours that you have been given. And obviously, it's super challenging because There's just a lot that needs to be accomplished in the 24 hours. And we're also, as human beings, we're quite greedy, so we do want everything. We want to work really hard and achieve all our targets, and be extremely productive at work. But at the same time, we also do want that little me time for ourselves. And I think I will at least say this for myself, that me time, and it could even be half an hour on a weekday or 1 hour on a weekday, is super super important. I think it's important for people to kind of make an effort to find that me time, because that's the time when you're kind of reclaiming sanity. That's the time when you're just rejuvenating, and just kind of reviving, right?
Hmm.
And it's
Yeah.
very important to sort of find that. um, I think when you talk about work life balance, a lot of it has got to do with um, your kind of individual goals as well, right? I mean, so for example, my goal could be, and this is perhaps a random example, my goal could be that um, I want to accomplish 12 things on my list today, right? And all 12 things I want to sort of tick off from my list, before I end the day. And therefore put myself under tremendous amount of stress, because obviously I'm not being able to do that. As opposed to, if I were to be able to sit down and rationally tell myself that I need to prioritize what is super critical, what is not that critical, and what is good to be done today but can actually wait and can happen even next week, and I don't need to kind of kill myself to do that, then we automatically sort of ease a lot of pressure. I know that I am actually quite bad at doing this myself, right? So I should ideally not be preaching. But the reason I'm preaching this is because a lot of my mentors and my bosses have actually told me the importance of prioritizing. And I wish that someday I get better at this, and someday I get to a point where I'm able to really prioritize and kind of think rationally about what is it that needs to happen right away, and what can wait, and be able to kind of strike that balance. Today I don't think I do a good job of it, I must admit, but someday I hope to get to a point where I'm able to kind of strike that balance. And finally, what I want to say about work life balance is that ultimately you need to ask yourself why you're working, right? You're working for sustenance, of course. You're working because obviously you have to kind of look after yourselves, pay the bills, etc., etc., fulfill responsibilities. But if your work has reached a point where you're not able to do the things that bring you real joy and the reasons for which you're actually earning that money, then I think it's perhaps important to relook at the way you're doing things, and it's important to ask those hard questions. And the hard question here is, why am I earning? Why am I really working, right? So I think that's really what it is. We are today, sort of brought this upon ourselves. We are the ones to be blamed,
Hmm.
because we as a culture and we as a generation take tremendous pride in being continuously busy, right? We sort of we've created this culture where you need to kind of be busy 24/7, and you need to sort of lead lives where you're constantly on a treadmill, and that is seen as a badge of honor, right? And it's a culture that we have created, you, me, all of us, we have created. And I think it's therefore the responsibility is on us to actually try and mend this culture a little bit and break away from it, because in the long run, I do believe that it is not sustainable, and I do believe that it is not a healthy thing for either the individual or the organization. Because I think if you look at the way we work today, we almost are quite robotic. We kind of get to work, we kind of get on with our work, we sort of do our 12, 14 hours a day of the same sort of execution led work. And we're not really taking off enough time to step back, to kind of sit, relax, to pause, to reflect on things that we've actually done, and to kind of get a perspective on things, and to ask ourselves why we're doing what we're doing. And that's actually in the long run quite harmful for businesses as well, because if you're not going to be doing that, you're not going to be able to innovate, you're not going to be able to think of big ticket things, you're not going to be able to you know look at the larger picture, think about where you want to go 10 years from now, etc. Because we're all so obsessively sort of centered around our kind of quarterly goals, right? I mean, it's all about what do you need to achieve this quarter. Nobody is
Hmm.
thinking beyond a quarter, and it's become a culture everywhere. And I do feel that we are to be blamed, and it's for us to actually be able to mend that and try and bring in some semblance of I think logic, reasoning, sanity into this, and really ask ourselves: a, why do we go to work, like I said earlier, and b, why do we do what we do, you know I would say that's my take on it.
So, see, our podcast is centric and listened by people who are entrepreneurs, professionals, and aspiring young generation. So, what would be your advice for our audience, which is young, goal oriented, and aspiring? How should they start with their career? Or what would be the piece of advice you would like to offer to them?
To young people that are starting out in their careers, is
Yeah,
that the question?
yeah.
Well, I think that today's the young generation. Well, specifically, I think the Gen Z, they're way smarter than what we were 15 years back when we were starting out. I think they know a lot, they invent a lot, they you know it, it, I think they sort of believe in the power of ideas, right? And they are not afraid to challenge status quo, right? So they bring in a very sort of interesting freshness to anything, to a conversation, to businesses, to everything else. um, I think the advice is that I don't know if it's advice really, because who am I to give them advice? But I think the only thing that I would say is that would just break the bad news to them, which is that there is really no substitute to hard work. There can never be, and you know there's no shortcut, unfortunately. I mean, it is really about working really really hard, putting in those hours, going through the grind, showing tremendous amount of resilience, being persistent, uh, being extremely sincere, and trying to do the best that you can every single day. And when I say every single day, I really do mean it, because it is also really about consistency more than anything else. um, and I wish there was a shortcut, and I wish I could say that you can actually wing it and things like that. But you can't, because by not working hard, I mean, uh, you would be the one that would sort of pay for it eventually. So there is no substitute for hard work. Yes, I mean, sure, there is a need to be a smart worker as well from time to time, but ultimately it is about the old fashioned kind of hard work that will get you to where you actually want to be. The second thing is that we have to inculcate in amongst the newer generation, as well as all generations, this sort of culture of continuous learning, because that's the only thing that will actually keep you alive, and that's the only thing that will actually take you far and wide. It is really about continuous learning. Our learning does not stop at all. It doesn't stop at college, it doesn't stop at university, it doesn't stop at your first job. In fact, those are just the starting points. It is a lifelong process. And I think that if you get to a point, and if you get to a headspace where you're actually enjoying this process, that's the time time that, that's when you will actually start falling in love with your work. Because the idea is to stay, Steve Jobs said it, stay hungry, stay foolish. And it is really about staying hungry and learning, and just continuously learning, asking stupid questions, asking tough questions, asking all sorts of questions, but asking questions eventually, and learning. So keep working hard, keep learning, and yeah, I mean, focus on the small things as much as you would focus on the larger things, because they're both very important. It is never one or the other. It's actually both. It's very much about the small things as well. Yeah.
So, yeah, that's so true. So it was great to have this conversation today, and I honestly have learned a lot from your journey. And we have discussed so many
Thank you. I'm
topics such
glad.
as like career choices, mental health, and I must say it has been one of the most insightful conversations around these topics. So thanks a lot on coming on the Legex Show. Looking forward to having more amazing conversations with you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I've really had fun, and this was a great conversation. And yeah, I mean, thank you so much for having me. And I mean, I hope that this was helpful.